So if we think about nature, every animal, every living organism goes through things, physical ailments, unexpected events. We humans, we have this incredible metacognition. We have the ability to think about our thoughts. And then we develop a story, a narrative about what we're going through. And sometimes that narrative of our experiences becomes very deeply traumatic, right? Or it takes on almost like it's a whole life on its own, right? So something that I work with my clients is developing a relationship with our anxiety. And I'll ask, like, what is your relationship with your anxiety? How do you feel about it? Do you love your anxiety? And people are like, what? No. But the goal is for us to look at it as this really helpful, right? Like an alarm that we are so grateful for, but that, and also learn coping tools that are going to help us, in the moment, kind of turn the alarm off.
I am so excited to have you on the show, Camilla, and we have so much in common. When we connected on a call not that long ago, it was just like old best friends, right? I mean, so much in common professionally, so much in common when it comes to just our passions and what we're doing in the world. So to start, we have so many things and so many topics to talk about, but to start, what are you doing? What would you say, like, who is Camilla Smith and what are you doing in the world today?
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you for having me here.
Aw.
It was a pleasure, connecting and just being here and being able to share and
Yeah.
who I am. Well, I'm a lot of things.
I love it. Yes.
I think the bigger one would be therapist. And I'm also the clinical director of a supplement company, but I'm also a yoga teacher and Reiki certified and hypnotherapist. So on and all, wellness is definitely my area, and specifically kind of that blend between mental health and physical health.
Yes.
So what I'm here to do, I specifically focus on anxiety disorders. And I think the past couple of years, especially since the pandemic, really highlighted the importance of us taking a serious look at anxiety disorders, but also treatment options.
Yes.
So what I'm hoping to do is kind of bring education, insight, and have conversations about ways to feel better. Because anxiety is such an interesting condition where it's felt both, kind of mentally, right, in our thoughts, but also in our body, right? Anxiety is very visceral, and it can be really, really tough to cope with anxiety or live with it on a daily basis.
Yeah. Ah, I love that so much. And I love that you just blend, like, it's kind of the science and the medicine and the technical background, for lack of a better word, but with, these other modalities and these other practices. And so I want to hear the story of kind of how you came into this and just the road to. I know that you've kind of traveled down a lot of different roads, and we were talking about arriving at that amazing place in life where it's like all roads led to this work. And so what did that look like for you?
So I think growing up, people ask me all the time, like, did you know that you wanted to be a therapist? What did you want to be when you were growing up? I wanted to be anything from an FBI agent to a nurse to forensic to psych to yoga teacher. So it's been all over the place. But one thing that I knew I wanted as I was a little kid was to help people. So I went to college and then graduated, and I kept being called towards social work, right? In my mind, social work was kind of that field of work, right, where we can be one-on-one with people and really help them. So when I got into the program, I actually didn't know that there was an option to become a therapist within the program until I got there. So I've been kind of divinely guided ever since.
Yes.
Started my master's program, realized that there was a clinical route, completely fell in love with the aspect of mental health. And I'm a very let's say, I love science and I love knowledge. So for me, it was like, oh, wait, this is really cool, like learning about the brain. So graduated, started working as a therapist. And within about 5 years, I started to feel somewhat underprepared. And the reason why was that I didn't feel that I had sufficient knowledge when it came to the connection between the mind body, right? We hear a lot of information about mind body wellness. But from a clinical perspective, I didn't feel as though I had a solid working base. And I also didn't feel like I knew what to do if somebody came in with what we would call kind of a mind body, right? Like my training was meant towards more, cognitive therapies like, EBT, but I didn't know how to connect it. So, and I also realized that there really there's this gap between mental and
Yes.
physical health, where a lot of the, let's say, doctors, right? Some doctors are able to deal or treat kind of mental health related through primary care, or they refer. But then when it gets referred over to mental health, we don't have too many options other than psychiatry and therapists. So I went
Yeah.
back to school to get my doctorate in health sciences. I just wanted to learn more. And while I was going through it, just exploring, came time for my dissertation. And that was right around the pandemic. And I
Wow.
felt like, for me, I could see the anxiety that the world was experiencing, the anxiety that
Mhm.
I was experiencing. And it
Talk
felt,
about divine timing.
yeah,
You
it was
talked
right
about
around the
divine
corner.
guidance, but divine timing about, and I'm just so passionate too about this gap. There is such a gap. I mean, we hear and we read about mind body all the time, but if you think about schooling, actually, there isn't much schooling that really bridges the gap between the two. It's very divided. Yeah. So I totally agree and feel the exact same way. So go on. Dissertation.
So I started my dissertation, started focusing on anxiety and looking at natural remedies. So my dissertation right now is close to 100 pages of just research. And I started focusing on amino acids and kind of botanicals, so different herbs. Now, while this was happening last year, I'm really big into manifestation, vision boards.
Yes, you're my girl.
Yes, writing stuff down on journals.
Yes.
I want to see it in front of me. So last year, I decided to make a vision board. And in the vision board, I put that I would have a nutraceutical company within 1 year. This was last April. So I'm working through this on December. So about 8 months ago, 9 months ago, I got a call from someone that I had been on the board of directors for another nonprofit. And she called me, she said, hey, can we chat? I want to run an idea by you. I think you would really like it. And I want to see what you think. I'm like, okay. So we hop on a Zoom call and, she tells me, and she's like, I'm working with, another amazing female, Shayna, and we're thinking about, initially they had a company for, it was kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Bumble or dating app, but for therapists.
Yes.
Where you kind of swipe and it would connect. But
Oh,
then,
wow.
yeah, it
That's
was pretty
brilliant.
cool. Yeah, so that was the original pivot. But then it kind of switched over, and she tells me that they're looking to launch a nutraceutical company
Oh
focusing
my
on
gosh.
anxiety. And I was like, what?
That is amazing.
It was.
And like, if you really study and believe in all of this manifestation, law of attraction, there's a science behind it, right? And I think that's why they're few and far between, but I think people like you and I that are, gosh, I don't want to fluff my own ego, but highly intelligent, driven intellectuals that thrive on science and data and things like that. A lot of times there is, a huge wall up to like, oh, all that fluffy stuff with manifestation and law of attraction. Like, but if you dig into the science behind it, it's very, very real. And when people open the door to that, it's just next level amazing what can happen in your life. Yeah.
Endless abundance.
Yes.
Absolutely. And yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. So when we had that call, I was prepared, right? I already knew the formulation. I knew which ingredients. I'm like, I've been preparing for the past
Yeah.
couple of years. Let's go.
You did 100-page document on that's how prepared you were.
Exactly. I'm like, let's go. So things started moving really, kind of quickly. And we put together a product, we tested it, we launched it, and have had, really incredible progress. And for me, that just makes me so happy. So it's been a lot of just kind of following, my heart and going with what kind of felt in my gut, that I needed to do.
Yes.
And trusting that it's going to lead somewhere.
Yes, yes, yes. And, it's so funny because we hear, like, I always talk about trusting your gut and trusting your intuition. And, there's science there too. I mean, it's a biochemical thing that's connected to our brain. And so again, people think it's this airy fairy thing. And I'm like, no, there's, physiological evidence there that you can trust that. And so will you, and we didn't talk about this before the call. So Will you share kind of the personal journey you've had in like the last several months? Because I think that is such a huge testimony to the work. And again, I think such a divinely given and guided life experience for you to walk through right now.
Absolutely. So there's a couple things that have happened within the past couple months, and one, I think, the most major one that really ties this all in on both like a personal, emotional level and a drive is end of November last year. I was in a pretty severe car accident. I was hit on the highway. Car was rear-ended. Hit my whole face, my chest on the steering wheel. And since then, more recently, there's been a cascade of, different things going on in my body. And what happened as a result was my own mental health, right? My own, well, pain, anxiety, discomfort, frustration. And as I was going through all of these changes, trying to find balance between, so I have a private practice, and so I took on the role of becoming the chief clinical officer, and that's taken on, it has its own
Wow.
set of duties, plus my private practice, and then dealing with my medical. And it
Not
kind of,
to mention like the emotional and mental,
oh
because I'm
yeah,
sure there's some PTSD there from a car
absolutely.
accident like that.
Very
Yeah.
scary. And it changed my life to, I was able to, before I did yoga every day, I would exercise, and now I can't do some of the things
Yeah.
that I've done. So as this was all, it came to right around July or end of June, early July. It just became so overwhelming, all of it,
Mm.
and the pain, the physical pain. And at that time, I was on an antidepressant. So I was put on an antidepressant to kind of help with, some of the physical stress. And, to be honest, these side effects were really hard.
Mm.
Almost, they were scary. And I decided that I wanted to get off of it. Because for me, and I'm not against it, I think it's a wonderful resource to have, but it wasn't working with my body. As
Yeah.
it started to come off, I really felt firsthand, the withdrawal symptoms. I
Mm.
felt my body shifting. I felt my mood. I was so irritable. I was having trouble sleeping, because it was just
With the
um,
withdrawal coming off of it. Can
oh,
you
yeah.
Would you talk about some of the side effects? And again, I want to clarify because we had talked about this earlier. You are not anti, pharmaceuticals, you're not anti antidepressants and all of that, anti-anxiety meds, but it just wasn't working for you. So what were the side effects that you were
I
experiencing?
was having really scary nightmares. And when
Mm.
I say scary, it was as if someone went in, took my worst fears, and put them
Oh,
all together into every night. I would have these nightmares. And I would get dizzy, almost like these, if I got up really quickly, if I got up at night, it was a lot of dizziness. I also, found myself becoming overly focused on, it was almost like my focus and concentration was just not, it wasn't in line.
yeah.
I would find myself kind of engaging in a lot of like pleasure driven things, like doing things that I'm going to do my nails and I'm going to paint my nails 5 times, and
Yeah.
focusing on what I had to do. So it actually, I was having trouble kind of staying on task.
Mm.
And as I came off of it, but the main thing was the dizziness and the sleep. The nightmares were just, it was to the point where I was afraid to go to bed because I would,
Oh,
one, wake up and then go right back into it and right back into
oh,
which actually I was talking recently with my advisor from school. And, we think, again, this isn't, I can't prove this, but there is something called serotonin syndrome, which could be too much serotonin. So my mood is generally good. And it's, for some people, sometimes having too much serotonin can throw us off, right? So we
yeah.
nightmares. So as I came off of it, it was really tough. Then I said, I've been taking these so we formulated the supplements, and I decided to start taking my own supplements. I'm like, this sounds like a good idea, like something I should have done a long time ago. I've taken them, like the different ingredients at
Yeah.
different times. So I started taking it about a month and a half ago, and it's been amazing, honestly. And I'm not just saying this, to toot our horn.
Yeah.
Really, I have felt really good, and I think for me, going through this experience of really kind of feeling in my body that anxiety from such a kind of like a survival point where I'm in pain, I can't sleep, I'm edgy, everything is too much, I'm overwhelmed, right? It was so real that
Yeah.
I think it was really powerful to kind of, come full circle again and be in this point where I'm waking up and I'm feeling good, I'm positive, there's still the aches and pains, but my relationship with my own, body and my environment just feels so much better.
Yeah. Gosh, I love that. So I've got two questions. So one of my questions is because one of my best friends deals with anxiety. And just yesterday I said, to help me understand what are you having anxiety about? What is the thing? And she said, that's not how my anxiety works. And so help me, but help the audience here understand. And I know anxiety is very different for everybody, but what does that look like, feel like? Can you describe like how anxiety presents itself?
Sure. Let me first start off by saying that anxiety is a survival and
Mhm.
adaptive mechanism. So if we think back to our earlier, times, we used to go around hunting, gathering, right? And we were nomads. So anxiety is at its core, it's almost like an alarm system that your
Mm.
body has when we're in danger. And this alarm system is active when we sleep, it's active while we're awake. And so the best way that we can, anxiety it's physical. So it comes with a lot of different sensations for different people. And it can be offset by an actual, something going on, an actual danger, even a perceived danger.
Yeah.
And so if we think about it in terms like of an alarm system for your home, right? We want it to go off. We want it to go off if somebody comes into your house. But also there are times where these alarm systems go off and we didn't mean, I don't know, maybe we set it and we forgot and we walk out the door and we're like, oh no, just kidding, right? We run back and we turn it off.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's ideally what we want to be able to do with our own anxiety, right? Is understand that we need it, it's helpful, but be able to regulate it. So the
Mm.
symptoms that we feel, because anxiety is a survival mechanism, it focuses on self-preservation. So when we feel anxious, so for example, something that commonly happens is heart palpitations, right? Or it might get really tight around the chest area. Some people have numbness, tingliness in your hands, or maybe sweating, hot and cold. For example, some people at night can't get their feet warm, right? They're just like, my feet are so cold, like no matter what I do, right?
So interesting.
Yeah, and the reason why this happens is the body's redirecting all of the blood flow towards the primary organs. So the body
Mm.
tries to protect the torso and the brain. So it takes all the blood. So what we feel in our extremities, our hands, our feet, is actually lack of circulation. And that's why we have these like hot, cold, clammy. And some people actually feel stuff in their stomach, so stomach aches, trouble going to the bathroom. When anxiety, when we feel anxious, when our alarm goes off, it basically it just focuses on the primary processes. So our body
Mhm.
says, you know what, this is not a good idea to go to the bathroom, not a good time. Let's just turn the
Yeah.
system off, right?
Yeah.
So we feel it in our hands, we feel it in our stomach, we feel it in our chest, but it's also, it goes into our thoughts. So when we're anxious, we become very, and I say this from a survival perspective, we become very self-centered, right? Because
Mm.
we're scanning, we're just paying attention, we're making sure that everything is okay.
Yeah.
And another way to think about anxiety that I often talk about, it's almost like, so the alarm goes off. Let's say that there is, something going on, a fire, and the firemen come, right? That fire, man or woman, is going to bust through that door, and it's not going to stop and take its shoes off. It's not
Right.
gonna, stop it and ask for permission or think about what they're gonna break. It's just gonna go, right? So when we're anxious, we're kind of like, a firefighter that just kind of isn't really measuring or isn't necessarily, we might be aware, but it's not our priority to really
Yeah.
pay attention to all of, we're just on a mission to feel better. We're on a mission to feel safe and stable. So it becomes quite difficult to be in tune with our environment. So we're very much quote unquote in our head, right? We're
Mhm.
thinking about whatever it is that we might be worried about. So the symptoms kind of go all over the place, from being like physical to being mental. It can impact our sleep, impact our appetite. It impacts our pain levels. It makes us more susceptible to pain.
Wow.
So it's everywhere. It impacts our vision. Our vision gets, our peripheral vision, so our side vision actually blurs out because
Wow.
the body is preparing us to look forward
Yeah.
and run. So we might see, kind of blurriness, impacts literally everything. our
Wow.
sweat glands, our saliva, we get more or less. It's literally top to bottom.
Wow. 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 That you just helped so much. I'm sure. I mean, it helped me so much. So I'm sure it's going to help our listeners just to understand when you don't deal with anxiety on that level. I deal with anxiety, but it's very, regulated and normal. It helps to understand the people you love so much, and it's so interesting to me too, to hear the physical, because I always think of anxiety as just the thoughts.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously I know panic attacks and things like that can happen, but I really, tend to think of it more as like just your thinking.
Mhm.
And all of that is so eye-opening, but also makes so much sense. So much sense. I mean, it's fight or flight, right? That's where
Absolutely.
you can't regulate that. So here's my other question. And I love being able to ask you this question because you are a therapist. Where does therapy come into this, do you think? Because we can treat this, medicinally,
Mhm.
whether it's, nutraceuticals or pharmaceuticals, but what do you suggest to people with like, at what point do they need therapy? Do they need to go talk to somebody to help kind of balance this out?
Yes, I mean, I think it's definitely a multi-pronged approach, therapy being
Mhm.
really important, because what therapy helps us to do, we all have a story, right? We all have things that happen to us, life events, traumatic events, unexpected events. And we have the capacity to kind of make meaning of these things,
Mhm.
right? So if we think about nature, every animal, every living organism goes through things, right? Physical ailments, unexpected events. But humans, we have this incredible metacognition. We have the ability to think about our thoughts, right?
Yes.
And then we develop a story, a narrative about what we're going through. And sometimes that narrative of our experiences becomes very deeply traumatic, right? Or
Mhm.
it takes on almost like it's a whole life on its own, right? So we have the event and or whatever might happen, and then we have our relationship with our story. And
Mhm.
that is where I think therapy can be really powerful. So let's just say that at a core, I have anxiety, I experience it. But let's say that now I am frustrated at my anxiety, or I'm so
Mhm.
nervous that I don't leave the house because I'm just worried. So, worry, frustration, right? These are almost added layers that then
Mm.
compound and make it more difficult. So, therapy helps us to look at, okay, what is, something that I work with my clients is developing a relationship with our anxiety.
Mm.
And I'll ask, like, what is your relationship with your anxiety? How do you feel about it? Do you love your anxiety? And people are like, what? No, why would I be here? But the goal is for us to look at it as is really helpful, right? Like an alarm
Yeah.
that we are so grateful for, but that, and also learn coping tools that are going to
Mm.
help us, in the moment, kind of turn the alarm off. So I think therapy can be really helpful. Well, if there's any trauma, right? Sometimes anxiety can stem from just traumatic experiences, to be able to work through that, to develop a different narrative, or to learn the skills to kind of pause, mindfulness, right? Pause and, okay, let me assess, right? My body alarm system went off, but let me just take a second, let me scan. So it's learning really coping tools, and a perspective that helps us maybe in some ways get to a baseline of
Yeah.
acceptance and love for ourselves, rather than feeling overwhelmed or angry or frustrated with our
Mm.
body.
Yeah, I love that because you're not demonizing it, which we tend to do, right? With so many things, not just anxiety. I can remember years ago, I mean, this was probably 20 years ago. I was talking to my mom and I had a therapy session. I was like, I gotta go. And somehow it came up just very briefly and about like, I'm working on my perfectionism. I'm trying, to get rid of my perfectionism. And she said very casually, you know, be careful with that because your perfectionism is also why you've been so successful. And I
Mhm.
was like, wait, what? Like I was trying to get rid and banish
Yeah.
this quality of mine. And I realized at that point in my life, every single thing has pros and cons. Every single thing serves us. And then to the other extreme doesn't serve us. And
Absolutely.
so it's never about getting rid of the anxiety. It's never about getting rid of the perfectionism. It's just managing it. And, like you said, I created a new meaning around that. I created a new story, and I started to really, I don't want to say love my perfectionism, but see where it was of value to me
Absolutely.
instead of feeling almost shame around it, and I know that we can feel the same thing, whether it's anxiety or depression. And we feel like, we have this scarlet letter on us, that somebody's put a label on us, and it's such a negative label. And when we can change that, it's so incredibly powerful.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
developing an understanding of our our body, our personality traits, and saying, wait a minute, how can I work with this? Resistance is,
Hmm.
oftentimes I think about like if there was like a little branch and it's going downstream, right? And it's kind of going. And let's just say that that branch kind of goes with the flow, right? So it moves and it shifts. But let's say that at one point it gets stuck in between two rocks, right? And it's just resistant to flow. It can't seem to straighten out. So what's going to happen is little by little, other stuff is going to like trickle, right? And it's going to start to back it up. So we're going to have leaves and other rocks and other branches. And so eventually it gets stagnant, it gets stuck, right? So every time we resist anything, right? And because anxiety is it's so instinctual, it happens, it's really hard to resist it because if we
Right.
do, we're resisting our own body, right? And that can
Yeah.
be really hard to go against something that's naturally happening within ourselves.
Yes. Yes. And okay, so let's pivot a little bit here with like the law of attraction. So what you're bringing up to mind for me is, when I was working on my eating disorder and trying to, hammer at the eating disorder and overcome the eating disorder and doing everything in my power, I was bringing a whole lot more attention
Mhm.
to this thing. And I was trying to, push it away and push it down. And it was that kind of aha that anytime you're really like, anytime you're efforting towards something with that, lack of flow, you're
Mhm.
actually making it way bigger.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, and also it is scientifically known. There was a study called the White Bear, I think, study. And the White Bear study was they grabbed two groups of people, one group, and they were at a movie theater. So one group, they told them not to think about white bears, but in case they did think about white bears, to go right ahead. And I think afterwards they asked them to like tally, or like they had like a little clicker, how many times they thought they saw a white bear in the documentary. The other group, they didn't tell them anything. They didn't tell them
Mm,
not to think about it. They just said, this is a documentary about bears, right? And then at the end, they checked to see which group reported seeing the white bear more. They asked the other group. And what they found was that the group that was told not to think about white bears over-reported seeing them. So they reported
yes.
seeing it more than it really was.
Yes.
They were very inaccurate. Being told not to do it made them more aware. So
Yeah.
every little thing, the brain was like, that's a white bear, that's a white bear, that's a white
Yes.
because it becomes this like, it's almost another way to think about it is that I'm still such a child. It's like Christmas when there's a gift in
Mhm.
there and you're just like, but what is it? And people,
Yeah.
and the more that someone tells me, stop shaking it, right? The more you just kind of, but why? Is it big? Is it small? Is it heavy? Is it light? Right? Our
Yeah.
curiosity peaks. So we
Yes.
put more and more attention into it because
Yeah.
we want to know why. If we tell ourselves not to do something, it becomes almost dangerous, for it becomes a something to avoid, and our brain wants to know why. How can I
Yeah.
avoid it? So we bring more attention to it.
Right. We're trying to avoid it. And we do the exact opposite. And I think the other thing that, when we were talking about creating meaning or stories or even identity, it's like if we have it within ourselves, this identity of being, full of anxiety or a failure or anything like that, it's like, and we're trying not to be the failure, but our brain is constantly trying to pick up on where we are being a failure. And I think the other most powerful thing is to look at that in other people, because I think we can all say, we see this every day in relationships when those people that push your buttons.
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
like they can walk in the room and they can
Yes.
say something and it means absolutely nothing to the third person in the room, but to you, you're like, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Did you, and you're looking so desperately hard for them to conform to the identity that you have built up, the story you have built up about them.
Yeah.
that your perception is so entirely different than the other person in the room. It's
Yes, we call it
crazy.
confirmation bias, and it's
Yes.
actually, yeah, it's a thing where our brain will look to confirm, whatever we believe, just because we want to, double and triple check to make sure that we're spot on, right? So
Yeah.
where it's so, but the thing is that sometimes, tying this kind of briefly at the beginning, you said gut feelings, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we see someone or we're around someone, maybe it's a stranger, someone we love, or anyone, and we have a gut feeling, something doesn't feel right, right? And that is important to, just be aware of. However, when we have anxiety and we have a dysregulated alarm system,
Mm.
sometimes, our gut center is sensing things, and it's a little, let's say it's sending signals. So it's so important to really, like, focus on or recognize the difference between, like, okay, this is an instinctual kind of gut
Mhm.
feeling and I'm going to honor this, versus, okay, I'm overly activated, and my
Yes.
body is reactive and responsive to whatever this person might be saying, because I do think that there's room for both, right? There's
Yes.
room for that, those natural feelings that are protective when we just don't feel comfortable being around someone. But then again, there's times where it's our own bodies, like, overly,
Yes.
mentioned, like we're just guarded. So
Yeah.
it becomes problematic for us.
Absolutely. And that's where, PTSD or just even coming from a place of, is this coming from a place of fear? Is this coming from a place of scarcity? Or is this like true to my soul, and being able to differentiate that. I want to dig in as we kind of wrap up the nutraceutical company. What kind of, because I geek out over nutrition and,
Yeah.
superfoods and all the magical powers. So what are kind of the formulations and what do these things do? What are the different properties? I would love
Yeah.
to hear.
So interestingly enough, we were talking about kind of gut feelings, gut health, emotions, right? We all know that our brain is a command center, but it's actually also our gut, right? So we have what's called a second brain in our stomach. It's a whole central nervous system in our stomach that has the ability to sense, to feel. So we have actual feelings in our stomach, and it
Mhm.
can work independent of our brain, right? So we almost have these two brains. We have the one that kind of thinks, right? So think about, like, where we feel our feelings, it's in our
Yeah.
stomach, right? We don't feel
Yeah.
our feelings in our head. Like, I've never
Right.
felt like a rush of feelings going up to my head. I feel it go down to my stomach, right? When I'm
Yeah.
scared, and you're just like, oh. So our when I was thinking about, when we were kind of like, okay, what are the main things that are so important, to us, into mental health? What are the areas that we're not really, where is that bridge, like we talked about, between
Mhm.
mental health, and the bridge is the gut brain connection, right? So the gut, we can think about that in more like physical terms, right? And the brain being that mental health connection. And these two systems are connected by, let's say, these little highways.
Mhm.
So, and it works bilateral. So if our gut health is off, it's going to impact our brain health. If our brain health is off, it's going to impact our gut health.
Mm.
So we really decided to focus on, bringing down inflammation, restoring our gut health, and also supporting our body with the nutrients that it needs to create serotonin, right, which is our neurotransmitter for mood, sleep, appetite, and pain. So in it, we added a probiotic. So probiotics are these healthy bacteria. But the
Mhm.
really cool part is that probiotics have been shown to travel up from our stomach to our brain and help.
Wow.
A lot of people, we've heard about leaky gut, right? How
Mhm.
we have this, like, intestinal barrier that throughout time and toxins in food that starts to kind of break down. We also have a similar thing in our brain. It's called the BBB, the blood brain barrier. There we go. And it's a lining just like our gut. And if it starts to kind of, disintegrate, then toxins get into our brain.
Wow.
So probiotics go in and they help to kind of balance out all of that bacteria. So we added a probiotic. We added botanicals. So these are calming herbs that have been tested to be as effective as medication. So we have passion flower, which is great. We added amino acids. So these are natural. And the one that we added was L-theanine. So L-theanine is
Mm.
calming, but it also helps with focus. It's like I mentioned earlier, anxiety often we're so narrow focused that
Right.
it's very hard to focus on anything else. So L-theanine really helps because it comes in and it actually alters the brain waves and it induces a state of relaxation. And then we added magnesium and B6. So these nutrients are specifically needed to synthesize serotonin. So that means that it's going to help the body kind of produce. So we really try to think about different options for the body: probiotics,
Wow.
acids, vitamins, and botanicals. So it comes in a little pill pack. So it's 28-day
Yeah.
pill pack. Although currently, actually, we're offering a 7 and a 14-day trial, which is really cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
And
91% of people when we did our study felt results within the first week. So it's
wow.
definitely really, it's worth, considering, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love this. And I love that you can feel the effects that quickly too, because I
Yes,
think a lot of things out there, they say, oh, you'll feel it in time. And it's hard to really understand, like, is life shifting and that's why I'm feeling better? Or is it
exactly.
this, supplement? So where can we find all of this amazing information?
Yes.
Point us in all the right directions.
Yes, absolutely. The website is join, so is JOIN, become with a K, BEKOME.co. We're also on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and we're also really, one of the main things or another focus of ours is not just providing a product and saying, here you go, best of luck, but creating a community of education. By trade, I'm also a professor. So by trade, I love to teach. Um,
Yeah.
and we've really focused on providing content, educating. Just last week, the week before, I ran a free webinar for people. So we're running events,
Mm.
workshops, putting out. Our blog has a lot of really great information and research. So it's also our goal is to create a resource center where we can go and learn. You can learn about the ingredients. You could learn about, watch videos.
I love that. I love that because that again kind of bridges the gap. It's like so often we can take things, supplements or different things, and we just, without the education behind it. I mean, my mind is blown just in the last 40 minutes with what I've learned, and it's bridged the gap for me, so that community and that education component are so important. Oh, I love that. And I don't really know any other, I mean, there's very few companies out there that bridge that gap. So
Yeah, there aren't too many for specifically like anxiety and mental health. There are a lot of supplements, but even Amazon. If we go on Amazon, we could find a lot of things. But I think to
mhm.
support the one-on-one, right? So we provide a free 15-minute consultation, even pre-buying anything, if anybody
Wow.
has questions. And with the 28-day supply, it's also included a 30-minute personalized nutrition consultation. So
Wow.
we will meet halfway or whenever and actually come up with a nutrition plan. So we'll assess how the person's doing, what their
Mm.
diet's like, and then make recommendations for different foods and nutrients so that they're getting kind of not just the supplements, but also the nutrition piece, and then having that checkpoint. So we're really trying to do more than just provide, a
Yeah.
free pill pack.
Wow. 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 That is amazing.
Thank
Oh, I
you.
love it all. Well, everything I'll make sure is right below this episode in the show notes. I think I'm going to have to send this episode just raw, uncut, unedited to a couple of my friends.
I love
This
it.
is so helpful, so good. Camilla, thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
your mind, your knowledge, your work in the world, and your time today. It is
Thank
so
you. So
appreciated.
grateful.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.